I had been working on other books, and I was coming home one night from the bookstore that I had co-owned. And Grace, I know it sounds weird, but she said to me, people don't know why I really had to leave. And I'm like, oh, okay, this could be fun. And then I decided, okay, I've got to research this. I've got to figure it out. And again, when I say research, it's a novel, but she had to leave because it was for very dark reasons. And I had so much fun. And the name of the book, Before She Was a Finley, came from Grace's story. So Vicky was in Without Grace. She was the protagonist, and she was searching for her mother, whereas Grace in Before She Was a Finley, it's pretty much a prequel, but it's kind of confusing because her story is told through a young journalist named Adele, who has taken a summer journalism course, and she ends up going to this nursing home where Grace is and finds out the story, and that's how the story unfolds. In Vicky's mind, because she would be put in front of the television because she was being raised by men in this very small town, and they didn't know what to do with this child, this young girl. So they would put her in front of the TV, and she ended up watching a cooking show, which was Julia Child. And she understood that, people gathered around the table, people were drawn to food. And she kept thinking, if I make good dinner, if I do good food, if I make a meal, my mother will come back. And that was in her mind. Like, she was like, this will be a family. And so that's why. And so she was always interested in cooking and making something in the town where she was living to draw her mother back home. Like, she would see her friends with their mothers and, the woman, the matriarch in the family. And here she was with, her older brother, her grandfather, her father. And she also knew that every time her father looked at her, he saw her mother in her because she looked a lot like her mother. And that made him very distant. So there was something about this woman that was missing. She wasn't dead. And the very first line, I believe, in Without Grace is when she was about 6 years old, she found out the difference between gone and dead, because she was always assuming that her mother was dead when she was a very young child, until she realized, oh, she's just gone and she left me. She abandoned us. So that was a hole in her, and she wanted to find her. She was determined to find her. She initially went through the phone book and tried to look for people with a name that she could find her mother, and she would make phone calls. And back in the day, people probably don't realize, a lot of young people, that you paid for those phone calls. Your bill would come, and her father noticed that all these phone messages were, and he was like, what was this from? And he found out that she was trying to find her mother through making these long distance phone calls. And then I'm trying to think what else she did. She just tried to find out where she's performing. And her friend would tell her, we would know if she was a celebrity. We would find out, she's obviously not a big name. And Vicky was just like, but why would she leave then if this was her career and she wanted to make it her career? So that was her search, her desperation, wanting to know, why would you leave your family and break her father's heart? She saw that her father's heart was so broken. I really never thought a whole lot about it. I had, written other books, some that were published, some weren't. And just the fact that she told me it was more than just walking out. And maybe that always bothered me too, because there is a scene in Without Grace, not to give away too much, where Vicky does confront her mother. And the dialogue between the two of them, when I had to revisit it for Before She Was a Finley, I'm like, oh, it's got to come from Grace's point of view now. Why did she say what she said to Vicky? Why did, that kind of thing? And I had to be true to it. And so when Grace got to finally reveal her story to this journalist, it started to unfold for me. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, that's what happened. Because I knew certain background stories for Grace and without Grace. I knew that she had been raised by an aunt, and that Vicky and her brother had been always told that she died in a car accident until they found out that wasn't true, and that she had been living with an aunt up in the hills of the Adirondacks. So there was something more there, and I knew I had to figure that out, and it was fun to figure it out. She didn't want to be discovered, and I don't want to give away too much. She didn't really want a career in music, but that was her excuse to escape from the situation that she was in. There was a history that would follow her, that like bad blood, something that her father, Grace's father, had done, that it was tragic and it was horrible, and that followed her. And then it came to rear its ugly head as she got a little older. So she knew she had, I don't want to give away too much, she knew she had to leave for the sake of her children. She did not want, and her husband, she didn't want them to discover this dark secret that she had, through no fault of her own. My younger brother, he loves history, and I would constantly ask him, like, was this something that happened back then? And also, especially when you're living in the rural area, like, did they have access to electricity? Did they have access to phones? Did they have, that kind of thing? So I had to do a lot of research for that. And also the music. I had to do, there's a Victrola that plays a part in Before She Was a Finley. And it turns out that I didn't realize that that was going to be such a major part in my story, because my grandmother, I have her Victrola, and I actually have it in my living room. And it just like, wow, okay. So something, when Grace was a young girl, she comes across this Victrola in a home that she had been as a child with her parents. And she found this home, and she's drawn to this Victrola. And it's funny, because that's what I have in my home, is a Victrola. You have to crank it, you have to do that kind of thing. But so the history of that was part of it. And the music, like, okay, who was famous in the 1930s? What musicians? And Gene Autry plays a part in this as well. And again, I said before that country music wasn't anything I really leaned toward, but Grace did. So I had to educate myself on that. So Adele, who is about a 17-year-old young girl taking a summer course, a journalism class, and this takes place like in the 1990s, 1980s, 1990s, and the assignment is to find a story. All the students had to find a story, and some were like the wind turbines, and that is a big story upstate New York. My parents actually had wind turbines put on their property. And so that was like, and there's a controversy with that up there. So, but she didn't get that story. So she had to find a story. And her teacher said, how about going to a nursing home and seeing if you can find a story? So, she went, and there was a couple of people that, the stories were just not going anywhere. And all of a sudden, she's in a room with this one woman, and this woman's got her back to her with a wet white hair. And it turns out it was Grace. And the question that Adele, the journalist, said is, well, is there any story that has drama in your life? She said to this other woman, and Grace turns around and says, drama like walking out on your husband and two small children? And the woman that was in the other bed said, she's never spoken before. I don't know what that's all about. And that was the springboard to tell her story. And it was hard for Adele to get her to open up. But finally, Grace realized, I'm not going to die until I get this out. I have to share this story of why I left the man I loved and the children I loved. And Adele initially was just a vehicle to tell Grace's story, but I had different beta readers that said, we want to know more about Adele. We want to know why she was so interested in this woman and cared. And I was like, okay, let me get to know Adele a little bit more, which I did. So she got to tell the story.